Chapter 1: Dust and Echoes. The crimson sun bled across the jagged horizon of Kepler 186f, casting long, skeletal shadows from the rusting remains of what was once a magnificent terraforming facility. Dust, a fine, ochre powder, coated everything: the salvaged metal shacks of New Eden, the worn faces of its inhabitants, even the sparse, genetically modified crops struggling to survive in the poisoned soil. Elara Vance, her dark hair braided tight against the wind, tightened a bolt on a jury-rigged hydroponics unit, her movements precise and efficient. The air, thick with the metallic tang of recycled air and the faint, sickly sweet scent of decaying vegetation, rasped in her lungs. "Another one bites the dust," she muttered, wiping grime from her brow. The unit sputtered, then died with a final, pathetic wheeze. Frustration gnawed at her. These units were the lifeblood of New Eden, their fragile systems constantly battling the lingering effects of the Great Collapse, a cataclysmic conflict that had left the planet a toxic wasteland. A gruff voice broke the silence. "Having trouble, Elara?" Jax, a grizzled veteran with eyes that held the weight of 1,000 lost battles, leaned against the frame of his workshop, his arms crossed. He was a master of salvage technology, a legend in New Eden, but even his skill was stretched thin by the ever-present nanite threat. Elara sighed, kicking a loose piece of scrap metal. "This damn thing. The nanites are eating through the wiring faster than I can repair it." The nanites, microscopic, self-replicating machines unleashed during the collapse, were a constant menace. They consumed resources, poisoned the land, and corroded any technology not specifically designed to withstand them. They were a silent, insidious enemy, a creeping death sentence for New Eden. "Heard whispers about old Dr. Thorne finding something in the archives," Jax said, his voice low. "Something about the terraforming project." Elara's eyes lit up. "The old archives? I thought they were completely fried." The pre-collapse terraforming technology held the key to understanding the nanites and potentially finding a way to neutralize them. It was a desperate hope, but it was all they had left. "Partially fried, maybe," Jax corrected. "They say he's managed to pull some data." A surge of adrenaline coursed through Elara. Hope, a fragile flower in this harsh world, bloomed in her chest. She grabbed her tools, the familiar weight grounding her. "Let's go. I need to see this." The walk to Dr. Thorne's dilapidated lab was fraught with danger. The wind carried the dust, stinging her eyes, and the shadows held the threat of unseen dangers. Every creak and groan of the damaged structures sent a shiver down her spine. The air thrummed with a low, almost imperceptible hum, the ever-present reminder of the nanites. Reaching the lab, they found Dr. Thorne hunched over a flickering console, his face illuminated by the ethereal glow of salvaged screens. His eyes, clouded with age and worry, held a flicker of excitement. "Elara, Jax," he rasped, his voice thin and reedy. "I found it. A schematic, the possible solution." He pointed to the screen, where a complex diagram of a frequency disruptor pulsed faintly. "It's a long shot, but it might be the only way to stop them." His voice was filled with the weary hope of a man who has seen too much despair but clings to the last ember of hope. The fight, it seemed, was far from over. Chapter 2: Ghosts of the Past. The air in Dr. Thorne's lab hung heavy with the scent of ozone and desperation. Elara leaned closer to the flickering console, her fingers tracing the intricate lines of the frequency disruptor schematic. The diagram pulsed with a faint, ethereal light, a ghost of the advanced technology lost to the Great Collapse. This is incredible," she whispered, her breath fogging the cool glass of the screen. "A weapon against the nanites." Dr. Thorne, his face etched with the lines of years spent battling against the odds, nodded slowly. "It exploits a weakness in their replication cycle. A specific frequency, precisely tuned, can disrupt their self-assembly process." Jax, ever the pragmatist, scratched his beard. "Sounds like technobabble to me. How do we build this thing? We're talking pre-collapse tech here. Most of the components would have turned to dust by now." "The schematic includes specifications for adapted components," Thorne explained, his voice still frail but carrying a note of determined conviction. "We can build it using salvaged parts." It will require skill, precision, and a whole lot of luck. Elara studied the schematic more closely, her brow furrowed in concentration. The energy requirements are substantial. We'll need a high-output power source. Something far beyond our current capabilities. I've already located a potential candidate, Thorne said, his gaze distant. A partially functional fusion reactor, buried beneath the old terraforming station. It's risky, the reactor is unstable, but it's our only chance. The risk was immense. The reactor was unstable. Accessing it meant venturing deep into the ruins of the terraforming station, a place where the nanite infestation was particularly dense. It was a suicide mission for anyone less skilled than Jax, and even then, his expertise might not be enough. And the frequency modulation? Elara asked, her voice sharp. The schematic mentions a complex harmonic resonance. Getting that precise will be a nightmare. I have notes on the process, Thorne said, pulling out a dust-covered data pad. But the original programming is mostly corrupted. It'll require reverse engineering and improvisation. A grim silence fell over the three of them. The task was daunting, bordering on impossible. They were facing not just technological challenges, but a race against time. The nanite infestation was steadily worsening, and New Eden's resources were dwindling. Failure wasn't an option. We start now, Elara declared, her voice filled with the quiet determination that had made her a leader in New Eden. We'll gather the teams, assess the necessary resources, and begin the reconstruction. The ghosts of the past are holding the key to our future. Jax, despite his apprehension, nodded his assent. He saw the fire in Elara's eyes, the unwavering belief that burned brighter than any hope they'd known since the collapse. Even Dr. Thorne, despite the fragility of his own being, seemed to draw strength from her resolve. The weight of their shared responsibility settled upon them, a heavy burden fueled by a desperate hope for survival. The past held the answers, the future hung precariously in the balance. Chapter 3, The Scrapyard Symphony. The sprawling expanse of the old scrapyard was a chaotic symphony of rusting metal, shattered glass, and the ever-present ochre dust. It was a graveyard of a bygone era, a monument to humanity's hubris and failure. Yet, amidst the debris, New Eden found its lifeblood. Elara, leading a team of scavengers, navigated the treacherous landscape, their boots crunching on broken concrete and twisted metal. Careful now, Elara warned, her voice barely audible above the wind's howl. Nanite concentrations are high in this sector. Stay close, and keep your scavengers shielded. The scavengers, a ragtag bunch united by necessity, moved with practiced caution. Each carried a scavenged radiation shield, their faces grim under the dim light of their headlamps. They were hunting for the parts needed to build the frequency disruptor, rare earth magnets, precision circuitry, and a specialized cooling system, all relics of a technologically superior past. Suddenly, a guttural shout pierced the air. "Hold it right there!" A rival scavenging group, the Hind Claws, emerged from the shadows, their faces obscured by scavenged gas masks, weapons raised. Their leader, a hulking brute named Krill, stepped forward, his eyes glinting with avarice. "We've been watching you, Vance," Krill growled, his voice a rasping echo in the desolate landscape. "Those parts, they're ours now." Tension crackled in the air, thick and suffocating. Elara's hand instinctively went to the pulse rifle strapped to her back, a weapon she preferred to avoid using. A fight would mean casualties, precious resources lost, and precious time wasted. "Krill," Elara said, her voice calm but firm, "we need those parts to save our settlement. You know the nanites are getting worse. This isn't just about scavenging, it's about survival." Krill sneered, unimpressed by her plea. "Survival of the fittest, Vance. And right now, we're fitter." Before Krill could give the order to attack, Jack stepped forward, his aged frame surprisingly imposing. "There's enough for everyone, Krill. Let's talk terms." He held up a small, data chip. "We have information about a much richer vein of scrap further south. Enough to compensate for what you'd take from us here. Share the bounty and we all thrive." Krill's eyes narrowed, weighing his options. The data chip held the allure of potentially greater riches. After a tense moment, he grudgingly nodded. Fine, he growled. But one wrong move, and this deal is off. The tension eased, but not entirely. The scavengers continued their search, the air thick with unspoken threats and simmering rivalries. The process of salvaging the parts was slow and painstaking. Components were damaged, rusted, and often embedded within hazardous materials. Each successful retrieval was a small victory, a testament to their ingenuity and teamwork. By sunset, they had gathered most of the essential components, bruised and weary, but victorious. The scrapyard, though still a graveyard of the past, now held the faint promise of a future they would forge from the remnants of a fallen civilization. The echoes of the past held warnings, but in those echoes, they also found the blueprint for their survival. Chapter 4: A Beacon of Hope. The makeshift workshop hummed with a nervous energy. The air crackled with the scent of ozone and the low thrum of scavenged machinery. Elara, her face smudged with grease and grime, meticulously soldered a delicate circuit board, her brow furrowed in concentration. Around her, the community of New Eden worked tirelessly, their collective effort a testament to their unwavering hope. Jax, his weathered hand surprisingly nimble, guided a younger engineer in the assembly of a crucial cooling system. Dr. Thorne, his body frail but his mind sharp, oversaw the process, offering guidance and corrections with his failing voice. The harmonic resonance modulator is almost complete, Elara announced, her voice ringing with a quiet pride. The modulator, a crucial component of the frequency disruptor, was a marvel of improvised engineering, a testament to their collective ingenuity. Each component, salvaged and repurposed, held within it a piece of their shared struggle. Dr. Thorne coughed, a harsh rattling sound that sent a wave of concern through the workshop. His face was pale, his breathing labored. The strain of the work, coupled with his already failing health, was taking its toll. Doctor, you need to rest, Elara said, her voice laced with concern. We can manage without you for a while. Thorne shook his head, his eyes blazing with a defiant intensity. This is the culmination of my life's work. I won't abandon it now. His voice, though weak, held an unwavering resolve, a refusal to surrender to fate. His dedication inspired those around him, bolstering their own resolve. The assembly of the frequency disruptor progressed slowly but steadily. Each completed stage brought renewed hope, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. But the shadows of doubt still lingered. The fusion reactor, their chosen power source, remained a formidable challenge. Its instability posed a significant risk. One wrong move could trigger a catastrophic meltdown. Jax, Elara said, turning to the veteran scavenger, we need to prepare for the reactor extraction. It's the most dangerous part of the operation, and we can't afford to lose anyone. Jax nodded gravely, his eyes reflecting the seriousness of the task. I've gathered a team for the job. Only the most experienced, best equipped. The reactor is a gamble, but it's a gamble we must take. As the final components of the frequency disruptor clicked into place, a surge of collective hope pulsed through the workshop. It was a fragile hope, born from desperation and sustained by unwavering determination. The machine stood before them, a testament to humanity's resilience, a beacon of hope in the face of overwhelming odds. Yet, the greatest challenge still lay ahead, activating it without triggering a cataclysm. The fate of New Eden rested upon the delicate balance of a machine built from scrap and fueled by the indomitable spirit of its people. Chapter 5: The Rising Tide. The nanite infestation was no longer a subtle threat, it was a raging tide, threatening to engulf New Eden. Dust storms, intensified by the nanite's corrosive effect on the atmosphere, lashed against the settlement's weakened defenses. The hydroponics units, once a source of life, were failing one by one, leaving the community facing starvation. A palpable sense of despair began to creep into the hearts of the people. Elara, overseeing the final preparations for the frequency disruptor's activation, felt the weight of their desperation. The machine, a symbol of hope only hours ago, now seemed like a fragile gamble against an overwhelming force. Report, she barked, her voice tight with urgency, addressing the engineers monitoring the settlement's defenses. Perimeter breach in Sector Gamma, a young engineer reported, his voice trembling. Nanites are overwhelming the containment field. Panic threatened to break out, but Elara forced herself to remain calm. Jax, your team ready? Jax, his face grim, nodded. Ready to tackle the reactor, but the nanite activity is increasing exponentially. Getting through to the reactor is going to be a bloodbath. Dr. Thorne, his face ashen, weakly clutched a data pad. The resonance frequency, it's fluctuating wildly. The nanites are adapting. The news was devastating. The nanites were evolving, developing resistance to their planned countermeasure. The delicate balance they'd been working towards was slipping away. Their hope, once a beacon, was now a flickering candle in a raging storm. A desperate plan formed in Elara's mind. A risky maneuver, a gamble that could either save them all or hasten their demise. She looked at the faces of her people, etched with fear and uncertainty, yet resolute in their defiance of the inevitable. "We activate the disruptor now," she declared, her voice ringing with a forced confidence. "We use the partial disruption to buy time, to weaken their adaptation. Jax, your team pushes through to the reactor, and we'll power the disruptor at full capacity. This is our last chance." The decision was met with a mixture of apprehension and grim determination. There was no guarantee of success, only the bleak certainty of utter annihilation if they failed. The activation sequence began. The frequency disruptor sputtered to life, emitting a low hum that resonated through the settlement. A wave of energy pulsed outwards, briefly disrupting the nanite swarm. But the effect was temporary, a fleeting respite from the unrelenting onslaught. Simultaneously, Jax's team, clad in heavy radiation suits, made their desperate run towards the buried reactor, battling through a tide of nanites. Explosions rocked the ground as the team fought for every inch of ground. Each step was a victory, each fallen comrade a reminder of the immense price they were paying for their survival. The fate of New Eden hung precariously in the balance, a desperate gamble played against the relentless tide of a microscopic enemy. Chapter 6: A Gamble for Survival. The frequency disruptor, a Frankensteinian creation of salvaged parts and desperate hope, throbbed with raw energy. Its core, a chaotic ballet of flickering lights and humming components, pulsed with a carefully calibrated frequency designed to disrupt the nanite's replication cycle. Elara, her face illuminated by the machine's eerie glow, monitored the readings with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "Power levels at 98%, reported Lena, her voice strained. "Reactor output stable, for now." Jax's team had finally reached the reactor, battling their way through a swarm of nanites that seemed determined to consume everything in their path. The communications were sporadic, crackling with static and punctuated by urgent reports of casualties. The air crackled with tension, the silence broken only by the hum of the disruptor and the distant sounds of the battle. "Resonance is stabilizing," Dr. Thorne croaked, his voice barely audible above the machine's hum. His pale face was illuminated by the glow of the console, his eyes fixed on the readings. His lifeblood, it seemed, was poured into this final desperate gambit. Suddenly, an alarm blared, shattering the fragile calm. "Overload imminent!" Lena screamed. "The reactor is destabilizing." The disruptor sputtered, its energy output fluctuating wildly. The carefully calibrated frequency was thrown into chaos, threatening to amplify the nanite's activity instead of suppressing it. Panic threatened to engulf the control room, but Elara fought it back with sheer willpower. "Emergency override protocol," she barked, her voice firm despite the terror that clawed at her throat. "Lena, manual stabilization. Reduce power output immediately." Lena fought with the controls, her fingers flying across the panel, desperately trying to wrestle the machine back under control. The air crackled with the smell of burnt metal and ozone, a toxic cocktail of fear and desperation. It felt like the end. Then, a faint glimmer of hope. The reactor, under Lena's frantic efforts, stabilized just as the overload warning faded. The frequency, though erratic, showed signs of returning to the targeted range. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the room, followed by a renewed sense of determination. Through the static, Jax's voice cut through. "Reactor online. Powering up the disruptor." A surge of energy pulsed through the frequency disruptor, its resonance now steady and powerful. The nanet swarm, under the assault of the precise frequency, began to falter. The relentless tide receded, momentarily pausing its assault on New Eden. The gamble had paid off, for now. The immediate crisis was averted, but the victory was fragile, a temporary reprieve in an ongoing battle for survival. The echoes of the past were silenced, for a moment, allowing a faint whisper of hope for the future. Chapter 7: Echoes of the Future. The crimson sun, a weary eye in the bruised sky, cast long shadows across the battered landscape of Kepler 186f. The air, once thick with the metallic tang of nanets, now carried a cleaner scent, a faint whisper of hope. The frequency disruptor, having weathered the storm, hummed quietly, a steady guardian against the now receding threat. Elara, her face streaked with grime and exhaustion, stood amidst the wreckage, surveying the aftermath. The settlement was damaged, scarred, but not broken. The nanet swarm, though weakened, still posed a threat, a lurking enemy that could easily resurface. The victory was fragile, a temporary reprieve in a long war. Jax approached, his gait slow and deliberate, his usually boisterous spirit subdued by the weight of their ordeal. The losses had been heavy, several of his team had perished during the reactor assault. "It's not over," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "The nanets, they'll adapt again." Elara nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She knew he was right. The battle was far from won, but they had bought themselves time, a precious commodity in this harsh world. They had proven their resilience, their ingenuity, their unwavering will to survive. Dr. Thorne, propped up in a makeshift chair, watched them with a weary smile. His body was frail, his time running short, but his eyes held a quiet pride. He'd seen humanity at its best, facing unimaginable odds with courage, ingenuity, and an unshakable belief in the power of unity. "We did it," he whispered, his voice barely above a breath. "We fought back the tide." The words hung in the air, a simple statement brimming with profound meaning. It wasn't just about surviving the immediate crisis, it was about proving humanity's indomitable spirit, its ability to rise from the ashes of destruction and forge a future from the remnants of the past. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the landscape in hues of orange and purple, a sense of quiet determination settled over New Eden. The scars of the battle remained, a stark reminder of the price they had paid. But amidst the ruins, the fragile seeds of hope had taken root. They had fought back the tide, but the battle for survival was far from over. The echoes of the past served as a warning, but in those echoes, they found the strength and resolve to build a better future, a future born from resilience, ingenuity, and the unwavering human spirit. The last echo of Kepler's 186f was not one of despair, but of hope, a tenacious whisper promising a future worth fighting for.